What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And today, due to popular demand, I will be discussing episodes 3 and 4 of WandaVision. Now, I just want to be extremely blunt up front, because I did give you a poll, or I did give you guys a poll. You voted, the majority voted that I should do week-by-week reviews of WandaVision. I will probably be doing this every 2 weeks or so, and then talking about two episodes, so I have a little bit more to talk about. But I just want to be honest with you guys and say that I don't personally love this show, and I want to be honest about my opinions because I would say that I used to be a fan of Marvel. I'm not as into it or as invested as I used to be, but I want to give them feedback. And I mean, obviously, this probably won't make it to Marvel, the people working on Marvel or whatever, but I just want to discuss it and kind of give my feedback and how I think they can improve things. Because my goal isn't just to critique and, be rude and criticize everything. I mean, I think criticism is something that is good. I think that criticism is needed. I do not think criticism is something that should be taken as negative all the time, because otherwise people won't be able to produce good products if people just say they're all good all the time. And I don't think everything Marvel does is good. And I've made that very clear on this channel. And I recently had, a discussion with my friend, and he basically said, I can't have a valid opinion because I don't like Marvel or something. Which is really, I think that's just really non-existent logic. I can't have an opinion because I don't love something as much as you? That just seems kind of hypocritical, because I could say the same thing about a lot of people. I mean, I could say that you can't have a valid opinion about Marvel because you are personally biased to like it all the time. And other people are, and I've already gotten this, people saying that since I do not have a personal bias towards everything Marvel, and I don't love everything Marvel, or I don't love everything that Marvel puts out, that makes me hypocritical or makes me not valid enough to have an opinion on Marvel. And I think that, we all need to respect each other's opinions, because on my last video on WandaVision, I had a really nice conversation with my buddy Hobbricks about our thoughts on the show, and I appreciate people like that. If you're watching this, dude, I really appreciate you doing that, because I feel like we really need to break this stigma of this weird thing that people have, this weird idea that people have in their heads where certain groups of people can't have a valid opinion on something because they personally do or do not enjoy a certain thing. And I am actually interested to make videos on this show. I actually do want to make videos on this show and give my thoughts on it, because I like doing that, and I like giving feedback and criticism to the people who are producing these things. So obviously, my main kind of goal with this introduction is to just say to you guys that I hope that you guys can give me your thoughts in the comments below in a respectful and civilized manner, because I think we all need to do that and kind of try and destroy this stigma of people criticizing things means that they think it's bad, or that they don't like the franchise, or just whatever it's connected to. I feel like we need to break that stigma, and I think if, we all just kind of have a nice civilized chat about our thoughts on the show, that could really go a long way. So, I guess we'll just get started with the third episode, and once again, this is really coming from a place of personal bias, because I don't have a ton of interest in, as stated previously, the sitcom aspect of this show, or really the characters of Wanda and Vision, so because of, just the lack of intrigue that they've put into those characters in the past, or the lack of investment that I've had in their characters in the past, once again, it just felt like a stereotypical WandaVision episode. I guess there was more significance to this one because of the fact that Wanda does have kids, whether or not, or Wanda and Vision have kids, whether or not those kids are real, or if they're just kind of some illusion that Wanda has created for herself, is yet to be seen, but that is something worth mentioning. And, of course, the mention of Pietro Maximoff, who died in, Age of Ultron, was it? And they briefly mentioned that, and then you kind of don't really find out what happened to Geraldine, who we find out in the fourth episode is actually Monica Rambeau, who was in Captain Marvel as, the little girl or whatever. So, Yeah, there were certain little things in this episode that I suppose were important, but it really just felt like another stereotypical WandaVision episode, and it didn't really do a lot for me. There were more hints sprinkled in, and we got easily the most information we'd gotten at that point. But then we get into the fourth episode, which is what I really want to talk about, because you may think, oh wow, so this is where we're really getting into the meat of the story, like you should enjoy this one. Like a lot of people will probably think, because of my criticism of the sitcom aspect, that I would really enjoy this aspect of the show because it's delving more into the real world and that aspect of the Marvel Universe at this point in time in the timeline or whatever. For me, it didn't really do a lot for me, and I think they could have executed a lot of things better. So basically, we start the fourth episode. We're flashing back to Endgame, when Hulk or Bruce Banner brought back all the people from the dead, and we're seeing that ground level viewpoint of what it was like when people started to return. Now, this feels like a slight contradiction on the part of the higher-ups in Marvel, and this may seem like a nitpick, but I remember people asking, hey, if people were on a plane when, like, Thanos snapped and they disappeared on a plane, and then, let's say, Hulk brings them back 5 years later, they would just appear in midair and then crash. And then when confronted with that question, the Russo brothers said, no, Hulk would make sure that everyone's safe in that situation. But here they're kind of contradicting that, because when she comes back, she's in a hospital, everything is just chaos, everything's going crazy. So that feels like a slight contradiction from the higher-ups of Marvel and the storytelling. I mean, obviously that was never specifically said in the franchise, but considering that it's what, some of the main higher-up guys in Marvel said, I feel like it's a major contradiction, and it's kind of stupid, because it feels like they're lying a lot. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Russo brothers said something along those lines, and I'm pretty sure Hulk wouldn't have wanted hospitals to be over capacity when people got brought back to life, because that would just result in more death, most likely, if people were in critical condition. So I feel like that is a slight contradiction on the part of the Marvel higher-ups and the actual story that they're telling. Correct me if I'm wrong, and they didn't actually say that, but I'm pretty sure I read something where the Russo brothers said that the people who were snapped and brought back were delivered safely to the ground, or were delivered to somewhere where they'd be safe and not cause more harm than good. So that just kind of felt like a contradiction. Then this opening, once again, I did like at first. I watched this episode twice, and I liked it at first. I liked seeing that ground level perspective. It's kind of like what the post-credit scene of Infinity War did for the Thanos snap. It showed the perspective of like the ground level, just random people being affected by this crazy, like, world-bending event. And then we didn't really see that for Endgame with the consequences of people being brought back. We didn't see that in that movie, and we got kind of a bit of it in Far From Home, but they didn't really delve that deep into it. Here we're seeing a little bit more of that, and I appreciated that. But then we get by far something that I consider to be really stupid. And I don't want to sound like offensive or rude by saying this, because I know that cancer can affect people in many different ways, and it's affected people in my life, and I'm sure that people watching this probably have relatives that have been affected by cancer. But I felt like the way they used cancer in this episode was very, it felt like movie logic. It just felt really unnatural and kind of stupid. So basically, Monica Rambeau comes back to life after, Bruce Banner brings people back. She's in this hospital looking for her mom, and then she runs into this doctor, and she says, oh, your mom died 3 years ago, which was 2 years after you disappeared. And she's like, no, my mom was she had completely recovered. She was getting discharged. And then she's like, no, it came back, and then she died instantly. That just felt a little bit, too much of a stretch. Considering, a lot of real-life stories that I've read, and people in my life that have been affected by it, my uncle had cancer, and my uncle died of cancer, a while ago, but he never really recovered from it. And I know that cancer can come back. I know it's kind of a weird thing where it just kind of spreads, I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard of Terry Fox, but if you haven't, just look him up. He's a famous Canadian man, and he went on what he called the Marathon of Hope to raise awareness of cancer in society and how it wasn't really getting treated with that much significance, and people weren't really worrying about it, so he wanted to raise awareness and raise money for cancer treatment. And then halfway through his marathon, he found out that cancer had spread to his lungs, and he ended up dying a year later. And he thought he'd recovered from cancer when he was like a kid. So that's like a lot of years without cancer, and then suddenly it comes back and it kills him within a year. The way they describe it in this show is kind of silly. Like, assumedly, Maria Rambeau had cancer for a while, then just got it again 2 years later and died instantly. Maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but that's the way they described it in the episode, and that is the most hollow way to kill off a character. Like, I feel like that's extreme wasted potential. Like, they just killed the character off screen and explain these contrived circumstances. Now, I understand that cancer and, sickness, like, it doesn't have rules, Cancer works in weird ways, and I'm sure things like that have happened in the past. So I don't want to sound disrespectful towards people that have been affected by cancer. Like, I've had people in my life, once again, my uncle was affected by cancer. But it just seems too unrealistic. I don't really buy it, if that makes sense. Like, I just didn't really buy the way they executed it. And maybe it's because we haven't seen this character since the 90s, so they just invented these contrived circumstances for how she died off screen. It just felt kind of silly. Like, I know it's a comic book, but it kind of squandered any potentially emotional, that could have been potentially an emotional moment, but they kind of squandered it. They really didn't do a lot with it. And they don't really give you a look inside of Monica Rambeau's, mindset in that moment. Like, what's happening, and, like, how she's, like, kind of freaked out. Like, you do see her being freaked out, and, she thinks her mom's alive. And it's supposed to be sad, but I just can't really buy into it, and they don't really do anything with it, because soon enough we're back with Jimmy Woo and Kat Dennings from Thor and Ant-Man 2, and they're just cracking jokes all the time, and I can't really buy into this serious world that they're trying to establish in the opening scene. That's my problem with, the way they're establishing this next, I guess, phase of the Marvel franchise, is it feels like they're going to rush past a lot of potentially emotional plot points. Compare Maria Rambeau's off-screen death to the death of Peggy Carter in Captain America Civil War. Okay? We have the first Captain America movie, the tragic ending. He doesn't get to have his dance with Peggy. That film ends with Captain America saying, "I had a date." Then we see her older in Captain America 2. She's got dementia. She's obviously very sick. And then eventually that leads to her death in Captain America Civil War, which granted is off-screen, but it does have a profound impact on the character and the way that he makes his decisions going forward. That doesn't really have an impact on... Maria Rambeau's death doesn't really have an impact on Monica Rambeau, at least from what we see here. I know that there's more that they're going to do with that character, but I just felt nothing. I literally just felt nothing. Like, it felt so hollow. Like, there was so little to offer, and they just didn't really try. It feels like they just kind of threw that in there and just squandered potential. And once again, just the tone feels so off. It doesn't feel like they're trying to, establish a serious world. Like, this is the post-apocalypse world where people have just come back. They don't really explore the circumstances of that, and I don't want them to, cram too much into this show, because I'm saying I want them to do all this shit, but I just don't really want them to cram that much in, if that makes sense, because... Here we've got 3 random characters that they cherry-picked from different parts of the Marvel franchise. We have the youth pastor guy from Ant-Man 2, we have Kat Dennings from Thor, and now we have Monica Rambeau. We just have these 3 characters that they decided to cherry-pick, and they try to give them character development, but it's just ultimately, a complete, waste of potential that you could have there. How about I propose this idea? What if we replaced Kat Dennings with Eric Selvig from the first Avengers movie? What if we replaced her with that character? We could still have her stick around, because Eric Selvig and her were kind of like a little group in, Thor 2 and, the first Thor. What if we had him show up, and then at the end of the series, when Wanda, I guess, realizes that she can't do this, the whole idea that I can tell they're setting up with this story is they're trying to have a poignant story about how Wanda's created this funny universe for herself, and it's this place where she feels at home, but ultimately she can't do that because it has a horrific effect on the overall world. Like, they briefly allude to that when Kat Dennings says, oh, this energy reading is contained for now, but it could get worse, and it's having bad effects on the real world. So Wanda has to kind of choose what's more important. I can tell what they're setting up. They're setting up, this funny, quirky world, but that will ultimately get torn down. And what if at the end of this, Wanda realizes she has to let go of Vision, he can't come back, and then you have Eric Selvig, a character that was manipulated by, guess what, the same thing that Wanda was experimented on, the Mind Stone. He was manipulated by Loki and forced to almost basically cause the apocalypse. He played a part in Loki's apocalypse, basically. And what if we had him be the one to talk to Wanda? Because she was also manipulated by, guess who? Ultron. They're very similar characters in that sense. They have been manipulated in the past into doing things they aren't really proud of, and that they probably aren't happy about. And they ultimately led to horrific circumstances, like her brother getting killed. She probably has an extreme level of regret for actually believing that Ultron had their best interests at heart, and ultimately it led to her brother's death. That's got to be weighing on her conscience. So if you had a character like Eric Selvig in there, who is kind of a comedic side character after the Avengers because he's kind of a little bit insane because of what Loki did to him, but you could delve into him a little bit and get little glimpses of how he feels about, the decisions he made in the past and how he was manipulated, and then you could have him talk to Wanda and try and have him connect with her, but then eventually it just leads to Wanda going insane, which leads into whatever this Doctor Strange movie is that they're making that Wanda's apparently going to be in. So I can tell where they're going, and that's kind of just, I guess it's kind of like a little bit of predictability in there, but you could still have Kat Dennings there, but here, I just want to point out the fact that it's possible to have humor and comedy integrated into a story while having an extra layer of depth behind the characters as to why they act that way. We can look at Marvel itself and see characters like Tony Stark, how he acts like a jackass all the time, but it's really just because his father neglected him, and he, the way he was raised was seeing his father being, the playboy, that person, and kind of an asshole. And he was raised to believe that that's the way you have to act. So that's why he acts that way. But deep down, he's kind of a little bit... He feels like he was a neglected child. And then a character like Rocket, that brilliant scene in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where Yondu confronts Rocket and says, I know why you act this way. It's because, basically, you don't know how to treat people. Because the only way you really know how to treat people is by pushing them away. You don't know how to treat people properly. It's a very emotional scene, but Marvel has done it in the past. A show that I'm watching right now with my friend that I think is really good is Cobra Kai. That show can be really funny, but each character has a layer of depth to them as to why they act that way, and they're hiding something underneath. With characters like Jimmy Woo and Darcy, they're just comedic side characters. That's all they're ever going to be. I can tell they're not going to explore these characters in any meaningful way. But if you had a character like Eric Selvig, let's say, like I already gave as an example, you could try and have that connect to the story and have him try to connect with Wanda on a deeper level. But once again, it feels like they aren't drawing that distinction well enough. I get where they're going. They're trying to draw a distinction through the direction between the two worlds. Wanda's created this weird reality for herself within this town of Westview. And outside of it, whenever they cut to, this whole episode, every scene in the real world is gray, dark, rainy, muddy. It looks gross. And then every scene in Wanda's world is bright and colorful, and it's like a sitcom, I get that they're trying to draw that distinction through the direction, but I don't feel a distinction through the characters' actions. None of the characters feel like they're acting like people. They just feel like they're props. They feel like comedic, they're just comedic side characters. And I can't really take seriously this aspect of okay, Wanda's powers are creating this weird alternate reality town, but at the same time it could spread to the entire world, and it could have disastrous consequences, and Wanda needs to let go or something. Like, I can tell they're trying to go for that, but there's no distinction being drawn between the world of the sitcom and the real world through the characters, because when we cut to, like, this episode, the beginning, you can, like, it kind of leads you to believe, oh, maybe this is going to be darker than some of the other Marvel movies or Marvel shows. Like, Endgame led me to believe that with the opening as well, but then it just ended up being the same shit again. And here, they're just cracking jokes all the time. Like, the guy's talking to Jimmy Woo. He's like, oh, I'm sure they miss you over in wherever. And he's like, no, sir, softball season's over, sir. Like, they're just cracking jokes all the time. Kat Dennings is like, oh, where's my coffee? You know, like, they're just cracking Marvel jokes. It's like, there's no distinction drawn between their world and Wanda's world. They're all just cracking jokes. It's just either bad sitcom humor or bad Marvel humor. And I understand that that's personal preference right there. But I can't help but feel like if you once again did replace that character with Eric Selvig, like Darcy, you could have a potential layer of depth that I can already tell probably isn't going to be there by the end of this show. And I feel like because there's no distinction being drawn, the potentially poignant story they could be telling with Wanda is not going to be executed very well. I will watch this show, and maybe I'll go on record later on saying that I was wrong and they executed it extremely well. But I can't see that happening because the way that they're establishing this just doesn't really seem like it's gonna go anywhere, like, interesting. Like, it just seems like, and they kind of explained too much in this episode, if that makes sense. They set up little pieces of the mystery which kept people engaged, but literally all this episode is doing is playing catch-up with the outside world, like the outside world's perspective of what's happening within Wanda's world. Like, they explain the toy helicopter in the hedge, and the beekeeper guy coming out of the sewer, and they explain, you know, like Monica Rambeau's little necklace or whatever, or Geraldine's necklace, I guess, if you're considering what her name is in Wanda's world. You know, they explain all that, but at the same time, nothing is really happening, and I'm kind of worried that each episode is just going to be, like, I feel like it's going to cut back and forth, but I'm kind of worried that it's going to be like one sitcom episode, then we have another real-world episode that's playing catch-up, and it just doesn't really feel like it's going anywhere, like, interesting, you know? And I know a lot of people are going to be mad at me saying, you know, that I'm being negative, but I hope that you guys can understand where I'm coming from, and I hope that I've phrased this and explained this in a competent way, because usually I feel like I can't really explain things very well, so hopefully the way that I'm describing this makes sense to you. But for me, this show just feels like so far a lot of squandered potential, and now that they've explained a lot of stuff, pretty much everything, in fact, I can tell where they're going with this plot now, and I feel like it's not going to be as good as it could be, and that's kind of my problem with Marvel now, is it's never as good as it could be. They always squander potential, at least with, like, some of the first movies they made, and with some of the more recent ones, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and Iron Man, I think are some of the best in the franchise. Because they do have comedic characters, but you understand why they're acting that way. All the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy can be humorous, but they have some extra layer to them. Like, Drax is a very goofy character, and he may seem kind of dim-witted, but it's because he has this tragic past like attached to him, and he doesn't want to show that on the surface. Like, little scenes like that, like with Mantis and Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, that is the potential that is there, and it is shown it's like there on full display. But I don't feel like we're ever going to get to that level with this show or with any of these new Marvel like things, because I feel like following Endgame, they knew how much money they could make, and no matter what, people would still say it's good. So they're just going to keep pumping out the same shit. Because I thought, you know, maybe WandaVision is going to be something slightly unique. The sitcom aspect will be something slightly unique. But now there's this other side of the story that is literally just the same Marvel shit. It's just the same stuff over and over again. And, Yeah, I hope you guys get what I'm saying, but I will continue watching this show. In 2 weeks from now, I'll probably make a couple videos in between then and there, just random videos if I come up with any ideas, but I will probably be making, another video in 2 weeks discussing the next 2 episodes of WandaVision. But I hope you guys understand my opinion, and you guys please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Like my buddy Sickbricks, if you're watching this, man, I'd love to have a discussion with you on what your thoughts are on this series going forward, because, I really like talking to you about this show, and I really like hearing all of your guys' thoughts on the show. Like, please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, because I really like having, civilized discussions about this show, because, there are people that really like it. There are people like me that are kind of skeptical and feel like there could be more done with it, but we're all just trying to have fun. We're all just talking about stuff that we like, and I just want to have a discussion about the show. So that's pretty much it on what I have to say about WandaVision episodes 3 and 4. You guys please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and let's have a civilized conversation about what we thought of WandaVision. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.